everybody. David.Fogel here, CEO and co-founder of the Symphonina Foundation. It's my great pleasure to be with Grammy winner Kitt Wakeley. How are you today, Kitt?
I'm doing well. How are you?
And also Grammy nominee for Mythologies 2, and you're also involved in several other projects this year, two of which were nominated. So congratulations for all the great efforts that you've been doing and the great accolades you've been getting.
Lots of blessings, for sure.
Lots of blessings for sure. Let's go back to your Grammy-winning an adoption story, which I believe was from 2 years ago, if I remember correctly. Right.
23.
So that's your own personal story, and not everybody would know it necessarily. So let's give you an opportunity to tell the story behind that Grammy-winning entry.
Sure. They say some of the best art comes from, within and your own, emotional challenge and struggles. And so I was in the foster care system by the time I was 7 or 8, and I've spent a lot of time there with my sister. Unfortunately, it wasn't the best of, first of all, it wasn't the best of situations to end up in a foster home, and it definitely wasn't the best situation for foster homes. And so there were a lot of struggles there, a lot of abuse, a lot of, just challenges. And so with my sister and I, we just relied on each other as well as we could. And unfortunately, for some reason, they decided that it would be best to separate us while we were in the foster homes. Might be easier for each of us to be adopted, or might be easier places. And so, eventually I was blessed to be, adopted by 2 beautiful parents that fostered so much of what I am today. Of course, during all that time, I was looking for my sister, hoping that we could somehow reunite, because that was my safety valve for some very formative years. And, time goes by, and I'm blessed to have gone through my journey with music and continue to look for my sister. But we eventually found out that through various connections that we were told that she passed away. She was killed in a car wreck the day that she was adopted. So that would have been the day that I last saw her, which coincidentally, she told the social workers about the abuse in the foster home, and they came and got me. So it was just a really cool,
unbelievable story.
Yeah, the last act that she did was to save my life, and she really did, no exaggeration. And so I went for a couple of years thinking, I had closure on my sister, and then one day I get this message on my messenger that said, "Hey, I'm your sister."
Wow.
So I'm like, well, no, my sister passed away, and then the other glaring thing about that message was it was coming from an African American woman, and I just pushed back a little bit, and I said, "I'm Caucasian. You're African American." She said, "No, I'm half African American." So I thought, did they separate us because of our racial differences? And in the 70s, that was very logical. And so she just started telling me about the abuse in the homes we had, what really happened to our parents. I'm like, there's no one who would know these things.
Wow.
And it was obvious that she was my sister. And we kept talking, and it was amazing because everything we bonded over were things that we could talk about. So we went about a month or 2. I was really busy. I couldn't see her yet, reunite. And she assumed maybe I was in LA or Nashville or New York. That's where I live based off my career. And I had no idea where she was at. And she said, "Well, I'd love to come see you, or maybe you can come see me." And I said, "I'd love to. Where are you from?" And she said, "Well, I'm from Oklahoma." And I'm like, "Well, I still live in Oklahoma." She said, "No way." She said, "Well, where do you live?" And I'm like, "I live in Edmond, Oklahoma." "No way, I live in Edmond, Oklahoma."
Wow.
For 15 years, we had been living within a mile of one another. Our kids played on the same basketball team.
I was going to say, you could meet her in the grocery store.
Yeah. We found out we've been going to the same grocery stores. And then once we reunited, we did run into each other at grocery stores and restaurants and things. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful blessing. And so within about 6 months of that, during this whole time, my wife and I had been trying to adopt, and we just wanted to adopt maybe a little boy from 8 to 10 years old. We'd already been through the diaper stages and all the young raising. And about 6 months after my sister and I reunited, and we're really close, and we're embracing our time, we get a call from the state, and they just said, "Look, we know you wanted one, but we have 3. They're siblings, and we don't want to separate them." but we're going to have to. And it's an emergency placement. Would you at least consider it? And you reflect on the past 30 years of your life, wondering where your sister's at. And oh my gosh, isn't it strange that she's half African American? I'm white. We've been separated, and the three siblings are about to be separated, and they are African American. So it was a yes. And we thought we'd avoid that 30-year search for three little ones. And
Right.
so I ended up writing an album based around that journey. And I think, again, when you have something sincere from your heart coming out, great music can come. And I'm blessed.
It's a great story. I think your adopted kids are taking to music too, if I understand correctly.
Oh yeah, they are. We wanted them to play piano just for developmental reasons, and but they took to it. They love it. One of them is already wanting to jump into another instrument, but they all play. Chris plays guitar and drums and piano. Nia plays violin, drums and piano. KJ plays drums and piano. They can't get enough of it. So it's been a lot of fun to watch them. And just like me, when I was adopted, it was really hard for me to find a place and identity and comfort. But music gave me that. And it's been amazing, the transformation that these kids have gone through. Now they're having recitals and stuff, and they're just totally different kids than they were when we brought them in. So
yeah. So at what point then did you get started in music? Because I'm guessing it's not at the foster care place.
No, I got
I
started like a lot of kids in elementary school, and playing the trumpet and going through high school, and I got lucky. I had a talent for it. I had a knack for it, and I was in the All-American, McDonald's All-American band. I was part of, I had a lot of scholarship offers. But the unique thing is, I knew notes, but I never actually learned to read the music and play. I just would play by ear, and it was easier. I was lazy. And it got me into college, and I got kicked out of the music program for not knowing how to read music. But they tried. And to this day, I go back and I visit with students. I do keynote speeches, and we talk about mistakes and how you learn from them.
Yeah. So your first instrument is trumpet. What other instruments do you play?
Really got into keyboards. Just loved the whole vibe of anything from Lionel Richie to the 80s stuff to 90s. They're really heavy keyboard in at the time. And then, of course, guitar. And, with guitar, sometimes you get thrown over to the bass guitar when someone's really, needed. And then, of course, sometimes drums. I'm not very good at any of them. And I've only gotten worse the more I've become a producer. And I don't have a need to touch for practice.
I can totally empathize with that, because during the, I would say month and a half that we just went through for this year's Grammy first round, I did a lot of promoting of our album, of the Symphonina.
It was a phenomenal album, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And, got to meet a lot of people I didn't know before and reconnect with a lot of people I did know, and spent a lot of time doing that, but didn't spend a lot of time practicing saxophone or piano. And so I'm, one of the nice things right now is to be able to put in 45 minutes to an hour and a half a day trying some of these saxophone exercises that are just kicking my butt, which is good. So hopefully they'll make me better in the long run. But I don't know about you in practicing, but for me, for practicing, I generally enjoy it. And there are a lot of people who don't. It's very tedious. They just want to play or create or whatever. But I do get into the practice part. Is that the same for you then?
Yes, I love practicing, because after I practice for about a week, when I can start to get back in the groove of that, stuff starts flowing. I do. I enjoy it. Just what do you got to do to get better? That's what you're supposed to be doing. Never stay stagnant.
Yeah, and the practice sessions for me always sound terrible, but then when I go, hopefully for my ear anyway, when I go play other things, they sound better. So I guess that's what it's supposed to be. You're never really supposed to sound too good in your practice session, because you should be working on something that's hard, right? So that's I guess part of the goal is to take on the things that are meaningful in challenging you to get better. When you are composing music, do you think trumpet? Do you think piano? How do you How do you go? I just say, like, for me, when I'm composing, generally I'm thinking keyboard because I started playing piano when I was 5. I didn't pick up the saxophone until a little bit later as a kid, and then set it aside and came back to it as an adult. So my first thinking is always on the keyboard, and then I end up translating stuff to the sax or guitar if I'm going to do that. So how does it go for you?
Everything starts out on the keyboard, but my mindset is when I'm playing arpeggiation, on the keyboard, I know that that's going to end up being some kind of 3 or 4 layered section in a string section, violin, viola. Um, you know, I think a lot, and once I get the basic premise, then it's just fun. You start, oh wow, let's get the movement, let's get the melody, and it just constantly morphs. Just I hear the whole thing in my head, and I use the piano as the foundation.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent. I know you focus. I mean, the first thing you said there was you went straight to the orchestra. So let's take that question for a second. Do you compose anything that you would say is not orchestral these days, or is it mostly like more exclusively orchestral?
I do a lot. I mean, honestly, I do several genres. One of my favorite is rock. I do a lot of producing of rock behind the scenes. People will bring me lyrics and they say, "Hey, there's 3 reference tracks. Can you create a rock tune that sounds like the '90s, '80s? Five Finger Death Punch, whatever it is." And I create MIDI demos of it. And I say, "Is that what you like?" And they say yes. And then boom, I take it to the studio with my crew. I do everything from country. I really enjoy electronic. Everything from dance to pop. So I'm really passionate about that stuff in the background. I'm not very good at writing jazz or global, but what I am good at is listening to the music going, I like that. What if we start adding these components? So I do write around it and try to add flavor. So everything has its role, but yeah, pop. And I heard a interview with Dave Grohl. He said, I don't listen to rock music. I listen to New Orleans jazz, and I'm kind of the same way. I don't listen to a lot of orchestral stuff. I'm over here listening to pop and rock, but that's where I get my influences for the orchestra.
That's great. I like that the crossover part. I generally try to encourage people to listen to everything as opposed to just one genre or one composer, even. But I think that's great. So so for the adoption story, if I remember correctly, you had the London Symphony record that. Is that correct? At Abbey Road, I think, right? So when you're creating that music composition, do you have in mind already the orchestra, the setting at this point in your mind, or is that too early to be thinking about where is it going specifically?
Once I have a demo ready, MIDI demo ready, a lot of people would think, well, it's done. But I stew on it, and I do start thinking about an 80-piece orchestra, not what sounds really cool in MIDI, and then I really get intricate about the harmonies, the counter harmonies, calls and responses. And then I start thinking, I'm going to need a little color. So all of a sudden I find areas where maybe a bassoon and a cello should be together. I get very, very strategic about the sounds and harmonies. But I don't feel like you can do that until you're done with the demo, and you just step away and come back and think about, what is it going to sound like when I'm standing in front of 80 people? What's that? Because it's really the first stereo we ever had on the planet. You got your violins and your violas and your cellos, and you got to think about how it's all going to come at you. So,
and how do you work with the conductor or anybody else that's involved in, let's say, post-production engineering from start to finish when you're going to the orchestra to get it to be the way you want prior to, during, and after the recording?
Yeah, I do several things. A lot of people use the Latin and Italian phrasing and footnotes on the score. I want it to sound like Rocky. I want it to this. I give real world, and produce. The conductors seem to really appreciate that. And so I usually go over the scores with the conductor for a few hours. They'll usually have follow-up questions. And then during the session itself, if I feel like something isn't quite going right emotionally, I just go down in front of the orchestra and I'll say, look, guys, this is what we're feeling. And of course, you have a lot of liberty after each take to tell the conductor, hey, can we try this and try that. And I think once you get in a rhythm, it starts to develop pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think if you're going back to the same orchestra too, if they know you, or the same conductor anyway, I guess would be the better analogy. They probably have a good intuition for what you are communicating. And it probably is kind of like a basketball team that works, where the person's throwing the ball to the person who's going to be where they're going to be, because you know where they're
Yeah.
going to be and the ball gets there, like any of those well-oiled machines.
When I go to Abbey, a lot of people think, oh, I go there for the recognition of Abbey, but believe it or not, yeah, that's what I did at first. But that's home to me. I know exactly how the studio is going to sound. I love work. I mean, the London Symphony and Royal Philharmonic, they know what they're going to get when they see my scores, and it's very flattering. And the conductors is the same way. The engineers know. I mean, before I even get there, John Barrett or Lewis, they know this is how he's going to want this, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a blessing because it takes a lot. It just shortcuts a lot of things and gets me right where I want to be very much quicker.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a YouTube video I watched, as educational one, and I forget who it was, unfortunately, to give them credit for it. But it inspires a question for you. So as I was listening to Adoption Story in the last few days to prep me a little bit for our talk today, a lot of the music, all of it's expressive, but a lot of it's very powerful. And you mentioned an 80-piece orchestra, which is a big orchestra. So do you go in, and then like when we're talking about MIDI patches, you might have a sample. Let's say like I use East West, and you can use whatever they use, but a lot of them are like 18 violins. Okay, so not everything that you're going to go record has 18 violins, let alone maybe more than 18 violins in V1. So when you're going from that MIDI to the live, do you try to have the live, let's say, outperform the MIDI in some way? Or do you want it to sound like the MIDI? Or do you want it to be like, hey, the MIDI was the MIDI. We want these great players to give their own expression to it and rely on them to bring forward the concept of the music?
Absolutely rely on the live instrumentation. It's got the imperfections, it's got the perfections, it's got the personality, the color, something that MIDI is just not going to capture. Although I do think today's technology with East West and the Hans Zimmer libraries and things are getting pretty salty,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I want the authenticity of the orchestra.
Yeah, I think the comment that I remember is something like, in Hollywood at least, I think that was the context of the comment. In Hollywood music, the impetus has been to be louder and louder and louder, and like no matter how loud you make the MIDI, the players are encouraged to overperform the MIDI, which makes it kind of like an arms race contest between who can blow the loudest. And I appreciate that, I guess, for the force of it when you're sitting in a movie theater, but for the things that you do, that I do, that's not really the objective. At least it's not mine, probably not yours either. So I appreciate your answer of letting the expression of the players come forward. Daniel Fisher, who made a comment to me. Yeah, Daniel, my colleague. There's thousands of years of experience in that room when you go to the London Symphony or the Royal Philharmonic or whatever, and it would be a shame to just tell them to play triple forte, whatever fortissimo with a forte is, I forget now. But it just loses everything, right? I think you let them be players, right?
Yeah, I agree.
They've dedicated their life to it, and they do a great job with it. Okay, so you've got your score, and do you do all your own arrangement, or do you have help with the arrangement? How does that work for you?
I do my own arrangements. I do everything. In fact, I used to be my own copyist, and then I realized, oh, you can hire that. So I get it right up to the point where it goes to copyist. As far as my arrangements, I'm very particular because my let's say format, my formula is not your standard classical. What I do is I know over all the years, whether it's country music, jazz, rock, pop, we have become so conditioned to an intro, a verse, a chorus, a bridge, that's what we're accustomed to. So what I do with my music is I emulate that so the listener's prepared for what's coming and it's not awkward. And I feel like it's worked because I have so many friends of mine. I know it's on their playlist. When I go to the gym, if it's more inspiring, I look over and the music's there. So
Mm.
and when I talk to universities and student bodies, I always get nervous about telling the student bodies that, but the professors and stuff are like, no, tell them that. They've already learned how to play Tchaikovsky since they were 5 years old. We got to get them out of their box. And so sometimes when we do things different, that's not a bad thing.
No, I mean that's I think coming to people where they are is good. So it's the same thing with the Symphonina Foundation of trying to get shorter Symphonina format, meet people with what they're accustomed to listening to and streaming in a shorter format, and a musical construction along those same lines makes a lot of sense to me. So, okay, we've covered all that. Now we go to this year. You've been involved in many terrific projects. I had the pleasure and privilege of being at the Alkebulan 2 screening earlier this year. I know you're partly producing that. Can you give us a little bit of your insight into what was going on getting into that project?
Yeah, I mean, that was a project where Matt and I and Angela we bonded really well over his first project, and I mean we were getting forensic on his first album, Alkebulan. This one, we didn't know what we were going to do yet, and we just kept talking, and I think it was just kind of a natural synergy. We came up with what I thought was a very artistic approach to the message of the album, and we talked about the music. We talked about how do we tell a story, and we thought, okay, we'll do these interludes with spoken word poets from Africa, and really bring out the message. I mean, Matt, his goal has been, I want to identify with my culture. I want to bring that culture through my lens to everyone, and he's just done a brilliant job of that. So that was the first step. So that's where we go. But Matt will go write the music. He will come up with his concept of everything. Then I'll come in and go, oh, what if we added this flute? What if I, maybe this part's a little repetitive. And as long as we're still meeting what Matt wants and his vibe, I mean, Matt has the ultimate control to say, no, I really like that repetitive part for that long. But he's usually very gracious and going, well, Kitt wouldn't have pointed that out for a reason. And then, like this one, I added orchestral elements, and it was a real challenge because you don't want to overpower. You don't need 80 orchestral players overpowering
Right.
music.
It's world music, right? It's African roots. Yeah.
Yeah. I had to be strategic in how to colorfully add that stuff. And then, you get into the mix and you start reviewing, and once I get it to a certain point where I feel like the mix should be, now it's up to Matt. Matt knows, he has a vision for what he wants it to sound like in the final, mix. And that's where I take a step back because he knows, I don't. And then you get to the mastering, we listen to it. And a couple times in previous projects, we're like, and this one, it worked right off the bat. So that one's, every project's different in how I produce in my role.
Well, okay, so and that's Matt B. and Angela V. Benson for those who are following along on the podcast but didn't maybe make the connection right away. So we wish them the best too. I had the opportunity to interview them after that, and we'll probably do a podcast with them here before too long again to catch up with them. I did remember I saw a little video of Matt and Angela watching the Grammy announcement, and their reaction was very positive, as one might imagine. I asked her how fast her heart was beating right before then, and I think she said it was at 6,000 beats per minute or something. So
let me tell you something, David.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
He's not only talented, but I think when you add character and integrity to someone and talent, they deserve it. And I was so pleased, very emotionally pleased for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And enthusiasm. It all helps. Okay, let's go to another great album, which did not get a Grammy nomination this year, but it certainly, in my mind, deserves one, which was Echoes of Grace, that you helped out on. How did you get involved with Patty and Emily Drennan on that project?
Well, I didn't realize Emily was originally from Oklahoma, and she showed up to one of my parties in Oklahoma because she happened to be in town. And then she was telling me about her mother, who had composed, I think she sold over 3 million copies of her music. Mm. And so I thought this was great. She does choral music. Then one night, coming back from like Thanksgiving or Christmas, she she calls and says, "Hey, we're in Norman, Oklahoma. Would you want to come by and have dinner?" I'm like, "Shoot, yeah." So I get there, I meet her mom, and we're just chatting, and she's telling me how she's looking, she hopes to find a choir that will sing her compositions. And I had just had a conversation with another friend of mine, Michelle Jensen of the Sterling Ensemble, Los Angeles. And she was like, "I just need to find somebody with some great compositions that I can bring to life." And so on, literally, as we say, a napkin, I started writing down how about we do this? And I made some phone calls, and it was a nice marriage. So that's how I got involved. As far as producer, I had ended up having to take on another project. I elected to take on another project that I didn't realize was take so much of my time. And I learned a lot from that I happened to watch a Quincy Jones video of how he produces. He didn't have to do everything. And that was a God thing, because I was so busy. I learned that I don't have to micromanage every part of the project. If you've got somebody that really knows a choir, let them pull the choir out. I don't have to dictate that, because they're probably better at it than I am anyways. And, obviously I know people who can mix a choir really well. So I hand that off. So that project, I felt like it was more of a quarterback, until there were certain things in the studio I micromanage. I want to make sure, certain things started at a right time and tune or whatever. But I'm blessed because Patrick Conlon and Christina Giacona, they're good. So they catch it before I get to it. I keep my mouth shut until it's necessary to open it in the studio.
Yeah. Great album. I really one of my favorites.
Job.
Yeah.
It is a job.
Absolutely. Let's go to Aaron Lazar and The Impossible Dream, another one that you've had more than a hand in. You're two hands and lifting and everything else. So tell us how you got involved with that one, which is up for a Grammy also.
Yeah. I had just met a gentleman named Jonathan S. Brooks, really nice guy, and I
know Jonathan very well. Yeah.
Yeah, I helped him get a ticket to the Grammys. He didn't have one, and he remembered that kindness, and he called me and said, "Hey, I just had lunch with a friend of mine named Aaron Lazar. He's a Broadway actor that's been diagnosed with ALS, and we want to do an album, and would you come help produce it?" Okay, let's do this. What I didn't realize was this was my first time, not only, to be honest with you, to manage all those tracks and instrumentation and things like that, but it was the first time that I had to deal with attorneys and NIL agreements and work. I mean, I've always dealt with work for hire agreements, but this became, celebrities, they have their managers or agents and reps have specific things that you have to make sure you're honoring. And when you have 40 plus, and then
it's a big project, by the way, everybody, if you don't know it, it's to bring in lots of different other well-known people. Josh Groban comes to mind, but other well-known people. You can go through highlight anybody you like, but yes, everybody there has their own attorney, probably, or army of them, whatever.
Yes, yeah, it's Sting and several of them. And the artists are great to work with. They mean well, but they employ these reps and attorneys for a reason, to protect them. And so you're literally reading a piece of paper and making sure before a press release goes out that it has matched the criteria before you release a single, whatever it might be, social media, whatever. I never dreamt that would be part of my job as a producer. I did learn more about, okay, I'll let this person handle the choir. I'll let this person handle, certain things. But then when my ear got involved and I realized, no, that drum track and that piano track aren't going to cut it, I had them recut. I was there for all, most of the recording sessions. And I always love telling this part of the story. I was taking the project very seriously. But when I was doing an interview with Good Morning America, they said, what's it like to produce Broadway history? And then that's when I realized, man, I better not screw this up.
And that's a great question too, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I made it very clear, there's 9 studios, 7 engineers, there's dozens of attorneys, 3 PR firms, 160 musicians. I can go on. And Aaron's the anchor of it. So for me to say that I'm producing Broadway history, I think is a little out of kilter. I think that we have to realize that there's a Broadway history project that I get to be part of a team of 200 or more. But it did send chills down my spine that I got to go micromanage this, because I cannot, if this is going to be out there on this magnitude, it better sound good or my credibility goes, I'll never get a high profile job again. And so it was hard to get to the finish line, and I'm very blessed. You should get to meet Christina Giacona and Patrick. If it had not been for them, this project doesn't come to fruition. It just doesn't. And that's another thing I learned. I don't have to do it all. And so I've got a new approach on the upcoming albums that I feel like I can do more quarterbacking and monitor quality versus just trying to micromanage it.
Well, that's great. There'll be more opportunities for you to be involved in more things too, then, right? Because your time will be more valuably used where you see it.
True.
Yeah,
true.
Absolutely. Okay, and then with Mythologies too, I had the pleasure of doing a podcast with Danae yesterday, and let's talk a bit about your involvement in that as well, which is Back to Abbey Road and Royal Philharmonic Orchestra this time.
Yeah, Danae did a beautiful job of assembling a dream team of people who were very talented in each of their respective, slots. And what I realized about Danae is she is a brilliant leader, humble, brilliant leader. She is, and she had a vision, and I knew about the vision from day one about, her story of mythologies. And I just kept going and going about just witnessing how good she is. And so I think that, again, there was a lot of people involved in that album, different producers in their role. I had my slot, and Emilio and everyone, and Robert Thies just did a brilliant job as well, not just on piano, but inserting his knowledge and his expertise. And I mean, when you're dealing with that many humble people that are good at what they do, it becomes a team produced project. And again, every project's different. Yeah.
Plus, you have all the vocalists too, and I don't remember everybody's name, like that. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
they're amazing.
So, what are the technical issues that you go through when you're recording vocals at Abbey Road with an orchestra versus just the orchestra, or does it all just happen seamlessly?
Oh, it doesn't. Nothing happens seamlessly. But when you're dealing with vocalists of that caliber, you're not as focused on them. And because if it's really going awry, you can always go back in and do their tracks separately. They're already being recorded separately. And you're blessed because right after your Abbey Road sessions, you can go do your comping session with your engineer the next day. And there's a lot of vocalists that aren't that caliber, and you are worried about the technical issues. But as long as they have line of sight to the engineer, line of sight to the conductor and the orchestra, there's a comfort level, and they just act on their own accord, and it's great.
How many recording days did it take to complete that project?
That was 2 recording
2 days. Okay.
And you can get a lot done in one day. Mm-hmm. Quality without rushing, just a lot done. But for that project, 2 days. 2 days.
Yeah. And that's, again, the conductor in your case has an opportunity to know what's coming ahead of time and talk with you, I'm guessing, right? So you're prepping them as opposed to just like what we would do with, say, Budapest Scoring Orchestra. It's like, okay, how we doing? And hi, good to see you again, Peter. And as Peter earlier, he did a great job on our 2 things that we did for Advent this year. But everything's sight read, including by the conductor in that setting. So you have the advantage there of being able to communicate what you're looking for ahead of time. So I think that's great. And then for your post-production, how long does it take you before you have a mastered track that you're happy with? You say, that's it, we're not touching it anymore.
It's different. I've went into projects where I thought it was going to take 5 to 7 days to mix, and 15 days later, I'm still in a hotel in LA and going to the studio every day, working with engineers. Same thing with the Lazar project was probably 15 to 18 days of 16 hours. I mean, we would think we were done and we were going to have to deliver the deliverables the next day. And we would listen to the choir and go, nope. And we had assembled a choir. Patrick Christina would help assemble a choir and we would redo the choir parts.
Yeah.
It was just constantly, I would listen to the drums and I'm like, that's not going to work. So I'm calling Kenny Aronoff, he's on 30 million albums sold, 300 million albums sold.
300. Okay.
And then, Nick Hughes from Bush, if you know the band Bush, Nick is just a wonderful session player, bass players, anything. So that was the biggest struggle there is we would get into the middle of it and go, oh my gosh, how did this go so, in fairness, before my time, how did this go so poorly? So yeah, it did. It took 18 days. Matt, we had a project with him one time that we thought would take 5 days, and 15 days later, we're still.
One of the things that I said this to Danae yesterday, and I've made this analogy to other people. When you go and you write orchestra music and then you go have it recorded, it's a bit like launching a rocket ship because you light the thing and boy, once you've lit it, it's going up and it better hopefully get to orbit, dock with whatever you want it to, do whatever it's supposed to do as opposed to end up exploding or something. And, Danae mentioned to me, well, there's all these adjustments that you make while the rocket is flying. And that's true too, right? During the session, and you're saying, hey, with too much trombone there or whatever it is. But then after it docks, you're not done because you got all that production. And then if it flew there just the way it was supposed to fly there, but it's like you listen back and you go, well, that's not what I wanted. Then you have to build a new rocket or you have to get another part up into space sort of, and then have them fit together. And, that's the thing. It's like you think you're done and you are at that point, but you're not done with the whole thing until you're actually ready to release it to Spotify or wherever it's going, So there's all these stages for young musicians to appreciate, I think, in terms of becoming proficient at their instrument or their composition, but appreciating all the other things that have to go into the production assembly line, if you will. And like you were just saying there, when you join the assembly line kind of in the middle at some point, and you're like, okay, maybe we should take a few steps back on the assembly line. It's you don't want to question anyone's judgment as to how they got there in the first place. That's not what we're saying. But, it's just like have a vision. Make sure you have that vision of everything that's going to happen before you get on that assembly line. Because otherwise, it's sort of sight reading the assembly line, and that's not very good. So.
Well, you and I both know incredible musicians, and I think of people like MB Gordy that stepped in. I mean, I called him. I said, I need you tomorrow. And MB stepped in and he worked his magic. So we're blessed that you and I have a lot of peers in our circles that are so talented that if we're in that kind of situation as producers, we can call in that arsenal. It works out.
Yeah, and having your connections are tremendous, Kitt. So that's another thing for musicians, whether they're wanting to be freelance or whatever it is that they're going to do. I think the more people the more people you're friendly with, the better chances you have for success, generally speaking. Introvert musicians can play well, but they may not be as successful as ones that are willing to reach out and make all those connections.
Yeah.
So what do you have planned for next year?
I just recorded my own album at Abbey. And so we're just putting just adding some elements to it over the next month. Going to record a children's choir, a voice choir, to kind of add the final icing, and then we'll start the post production, the mixing and the mastering, and I'm really proud of this one. I've been told it's the best stuff I've ever been done. I'll have to trust the people that are hearing it.
Can't wait. That's great.
Brody and Jeff are like, this is just groundbreaking, Kitt. How did you come up with this? I'm like, well, you guys think so at your level? I will take that all day long. So I'm looking forward to that one. I think people are going to like the story, and I think people are going to like the music.
When do you think you'll have that out, Kitt?
I'd like to have it branded before July, and I would like to have it out by July.
Okay. All right. And your Abbey Road, was that Royal Philharmonic recording again for you there? Or?
I used the Royal Philharmonic on this one. Each orchestra has their positives, and I felt like the Royal Philharmonic was probably the better fit for this one.
Okay, and a boys choir, you said, if I heard that.
Yes, we'll do a boys choir in Seattle.
Wonderful. That's I can hardly. Do you have a title in mind?
Yeah, it's 7 seasons.
Okay.
We all hear about the stages of grief, but there's also stages of trauma. You know, the day before they fly airplanes into the World Trade Center, it's a day of innocence. You know, the birds are singing, the skies are blue.
No doubt.
And then the next day, you don't see it coming. So day 2 is, season 2 is the trauma. And the next day is the season of disbelief. What did that really just happen? And then there's the chaos, the confusion. I mean, there's all these rumors about how, and it doesn't have to be on that. I interviewed over 20 people who'd suffered some kind of trauma. Maybe it was learning they had terminal cancer, NBA coach that had lost his family in a car wreck. I interviewed a lady that was involved in the Oklahoma City bombing, people who, like I said, people who lost their job, whatever it was. I just charted everything they said. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a day of innocence. There's a day it hits you out of the blue. And you start going, like I said, the confusion. Were there more bombers at Oklahoma City than they say? Was the person who hit my wife and killed her, was she drunk, or was it the dog that jumped in her lap? Was it was just that? And then we always get to that point of why. Why did somebody get behind a wheel intoxicated? Why did people think it was necessary to fly a plane into buildings, whatever that might be? Why did they fire me? I was a good employee. I don't understand. So those are the stages I take you through the music. And again, if you don't have purpose for your album, it's just not going to communicate to the listeners. It's not going to resonate like it should.
Well, I'm already on the edge of my seat. Looking forward to it. I'll get on the edge of my seat. There we go.
You set the bar low, my friend.
No. That sounds great. Absolutely looking forward to it. And we'll have to have you back another time. We can talk more about how we can help younger people come to appreciate orchestra music more specifically. But I think we've covered a lot of things today. And I wish you all the best for all the projects that you're involved in for the upcoming Grammy season and for next year. And Kitt, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, I'm pretty open. Just email me at kitt@kittwakeley.com. I'm really, pretty responsive. And, once you have my email, more than likely you're going to end up with my phone number. So
that sounds good. Kitt, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. I appreciate all your kindness. Thank you.